Hello there, kia ora. Thursday this week was not a great week for government announcements. There were actually three big announcements that came out before 2 p.m., which is when I'm recording this video, that are kind of really not good. The first was that our GDP had actually shrunk by 0.1% for the final quarter of 2023. That's the quarter that the current government was actually in charge. And while David Seymour popped the video out as quickly as he could blaming Labour, the fact of the matter is the causes of this GDP shrinkage, a lot of it sits firmly on the shoulders of the current government. There were issues around things like the cost of living crisis, seeing a reduction in spend going to things like food, alcohol, and petrol. But there was also issues around the fact that trades saw a massive reduction in the amount of money that they were spending. And part of that's because when this government came in, they started changing the processes around consents, which made it much more problematic for people who were wanting to build or start construction projects because they didn't know exactly what they were going to have to do, so that kind of thing gets put on hold. There was also an issue that hit our GDP around the amount of money being spent on infrastructure, because while there were big projects going ahead, like the Auckland Light Rail project, that money got spent and was part of our GDP turnover. By reducing that, according to Treasury, that was another one of the factors that impacted our GDP and helped it shrink. But don't worry, apparently it's all Labour's fault, according to the parties that are meant to be really good with money. The second big announcement was actually a reduction in staff from the Ministry of Primary Industries. And this is a big one for us because MPI deals with the majority of stuff that we export from the agriculture industries. When it comes to things like food safety, they have an element to do with that. Wine, they have an element to do with that. And when it comes to things like animal safety, they have a big part to do that. MPI, for example, is the organization that goes around to farms to make sure that they're not, dealing with animal abuse in a particularly horrific way, especially if they're related in some way to an MP. And having a reduction in staff means it's less likely that those kind of people are going to be caught, and much more likely that an MP would be able to exert undue influence on any kind of investigation into that kind of behavior. It has got a huge impact on our economy and on what we do here as a country. And then, thirdly, the Ministry of Health announced a reduction of 25% of its staffing levels. That's huge. This was the ministry that over the last few years has led the way in what we did to respond at the height of the COVID pandemic. They're being reduced in numbers by 25%. That's a quarter of the staff from the Ministry of Health directly going to be out of a job. And that's really problematic as well because we're not over the pandemic. We're constantly seeing things change. We've got a measles outbreak, for example, that we're on the verge of dealing with at the moment. The work that our Ministry of Health does helps keep people safe, even in the back room. So, this kind of cut is really dangerous to all of us. But don't worry, because tax cuts for landlords and millionaires need to take precedence here. Without them, our society would obviously crumble and be a far poorer place. So we need to lose people from industries like MPI or the Ministry of Health because, well, tax cuts aren't going to pay for themselves, are they?